Robert Bryce, a senior fellow with the Manhattan Institute, puts things just very simply and bluntly on his page about why there's so many green myths out there. And here's some of them. Solar and wind power are the greenest of them all. That's a myth, he says. Solar and wind technologies require huge amounts of land, first of all, to deliver relatively small, I would say minuscule, relatively small amounts of energy, and they disrupt the natural habitats far more than oil drilling could ever imagine. As we know, when you look up and see all the windmills, my gosh, it covers, you know, hundreds of miles of land. The Nature Conservancy issued a report last year critical of energy sprawl. We've heard of suburban sprawl and urban sprawl and everything else. Now they're calling it energy sprawl, because that also includes the tens of thousands of miles of high voltage transmission lines that are needed to carry electricity from the wind and solar installations to distant cities. Another myth, going green will reduce our dependence on imports from unsavory regimes. Well, that's true when we're talking about gasoline, about oil. However, when we go green, the problem is that the biggest supplier of what we need to go green is China, because China makes elements called lanthanides. And don't ask me what those are, but apparently they're very rare, and that's what they use to make those high-capacity batteries and the hybrid electric vehicles. And also, that's what they use to power some of the wind turbines and different oil refineries that they want to be cleaner. China right now controls between 95 and 100% of the global market of these elements. So going green may just make us beholden to China, as if we aren't enough beholden to China already. Another myth, a green American economy will create green jobs, green American jobs. And many of us know that this is false just by the fact that domestic labor costs are so high that in order to compete with China, all these contracts are going to go to China because they can do it more cheaply and more effectively due to the fact that they do not have to pay the union wages. Another myth, electric cars will substantially reduce demand for oil. Gasoline, this guy Robert Bryce says, contains 80 times as much energy by weight as the best lithium-based battery. 80 times. I thought that was interesting. Plus, about 40% of customers who maybe want a hybrid electric car do not have the proper outlet to charge the battery for a hybrid. It's not just a simple plug-in, you know, the same thing you plug your TV in, it's a special outlet. Another green myth. The United States lags behind other rich countries in going green. According to data from the Energy Information Administration, average per capita energy consumption in the U.S. fell by 2.5% from 1980 to 2006, and that reduction was greater than in any other developed country except Switzerland and Denmark. And that was without participating in the Kyoto Protocol or creating any kind of cap and trade system like the one they have in Europe. So green myths out there. You can look that up. Just look up Manhattan Institute. Robert Bryce has those stories. The Washington Post reported last week that the DNC and the RNC spend about 2/3 of the money they take in on the care and comfort of committee staffs as they travel around in their limousines and expensive hotels and meals and strip clubs, apparently. I guess I don't really have a problem with this, but I think there should be perhaps some boundaries or some guidelines. Apparently there are absolutely no guidelines in either committee as to what is appropriate spending and what is not. The nonprofit Center for Responsive Politics said on the Post that administrative and fundraising expenses consumed $60 million of DNC revenue and $100 million for RNC revenue, and those numbers just keep increasing every year. So I'm just thinking maybe they could have some guidelines on there, and things like back waxing and strip clubs should just be eliminated. As many of you heard, Obama trekked to Quincy, Illinois this past week to pitch the Wall Street financial reform and etc. And there was a big tea party there. And apparently the sheriff there, a guy by the name of Deputy Police Chief Ron Dreyer, called for members of the mobile field force to walk up and down the street. And you can look this up on YouTube, and it's pretty hilarious. These guys come out, you know, they look like a SWAT team, and they got their gear on. And they're walking up and down the streets, just standing there looking at these Tea Party activists, and these little old ladies are just kind of laughing at them. Somebody at the Post is reporting that a Secret Service agent told these guys to taunt the Tea Party activists and ask them to do things like, well, move further down the street, or don't stand here and stand there, to try to get them going. But there was no violence, of course, as usual. There were, however, There was, however, some violence this past week in Arizona, where some protesters threw water bottles at the cops. That, of course, is over the new illegal immigration reform law in Arizona. They also passed a law in Arizona where they are barring colleges and high schools from teaching what they call ethnic studies, because they are divisive and they are pitting groups of individuals against each other. So real interesting things going on in Arizona. It's kind of scary. We'll see what happens this weekend with all of the protests going on. I'm going to close out with another quote today. This one's from Winston Churchill. "Criticism may not be agreeable, but it is necessary. It fulfills the same function as pain in the human body. It calls attention to an unhealthy state of things." You've been listening to the Amy McManus Show on AM 1480 WLEA. Coming up next, Brian O'Neill with Connections.
AM 1480 WLEA.